Around Australia, if you drive home this afternoon, it's Carrie Bickmore and Tommy Little.
So I noticed something that was happening amongst friends and their kids. I noticed it at schools as well. And I thought, that's weird. And then so it was anecdotal at this point. And then I came across an article online and my brain was like, I knew it. I knew this seemed to be happening. And what the article was about was that puberty is happening younger and younger for young girls. So puberty is starting 3 months earlier every decade. So like 100 years ago, it began around 14, 15. I went through puberty not 100 years ago, but about 14. But today, children are entering pre-puberty as early as 6 to 8 years old. And there's lots of kids in primary school, middle primary school that are getting their periods. I don't know why, and I want to explore this idea more. And we've got on the line a lady by the name of Zara Kadir who has the Therapy Shed, which is an Instagram account that I came across, and she joins us now. Welcome, Zara.
Hi, thanks for having me.
So this is insane for starters. Are we talking how young, on average, are girls getting their periods now?
So 8 years old for girls and 9 years old for boys is now considered the early side of average, but still average. So you wouldn't be recommended to go to a paediatrician if your 8-year-old daughter started puberty any earlier than that, and it would be considered precocious puberty. But 8 years old is now considered quite average.
And when you say puberty, I noticed in some of the articles I was reading, you're not necessarily saying a 6 to 8 year old straight away has their period, but might be showing signs even that they're entering that period that normally we did in like when we were 11 and 12, but they're doing that at like 6 to 8. What are some of those signs?
Yeah, so there's a precursor to puberty called andronarche, which is not necessarily, like pubic hair, periods, all those kind of things. You might get like a bit of body odor, but actually typically what we're seeing is it comes out in behavior. So we used to have this kind of what was called a latency period. So from, children would start to regulate their emotions around the age of 6, have less tantrums, meltdowns, and you'd have this kind of fairly easy stretch until they reached puberty around 12. Whereas now they're going kind of out of the fire and into the frying pan. So they're finishing their kind of toddler development emotionally. And then they get these surges of like puberty and pre-puberty hormones. So we see a lot of really dysregulated kids. And I noticed it in my clinic that all of my clients seem to be 8-year-old girls whose parents were like, she's having these tantrums. She's lying on the floor and screaming. She's crying. She's anxious. And I realized that actually there's got to be something to do with this. And I think it's that these kids are all experiencing the precursor to puberty.
Zara, obviously we want to dig into a bit more what it means for our kids and why they're struggling to cope and coping mechanisms. But first, before we get into that, can you tell us why are we going through puberty at a younger and younger age?
Well, I'm not an endocrinologist, but obviously I've done a bit of a dive into it. So it seems that at the moment, nobody can say conclusively with certainty exactly what it is, but it's probably one of three things or all three things. So the first one would be that actually, if we look at 100 years ago, the amount of wars and famines that would have been experienced, that actually your body shuts down the desire to reproduce during a famine because it's just not a good time to have a baby. Whereas now there's such an abundance of food, and there is a correlation between obesity and earlier periods. So part of it is this abundance of food that we have. Part of it is stress. So things like, I don't know about the education system there, but in England, kids have exams and assessments, and there's a lot of pressure for learning very early on. And then also, obviously there's the impact of social media and screens and those kind of environmental stresses. And then finally, there's environmental hormone disruptors. So things like estrogen in meat and dairy products.
Oh my God, the hormones in the chickens. Is that a real thing? I thought that was just a thing that everybody said.
No, it is a real thing. And also anything with a fragrance has elements to it that can mimic and interact with our hormones and signal to your brain to start releasing these puberty hormones much earlier. So, like I said, the research is still quite early because it's quite a new phenomenon. And the kids that they started the research on are only now kind of in their mid-20s. So there's not a huge pool of data. But it's, typically it seems to be that people say one of those three things or all of those three things.
So apart from, obviously parents don't want their kids to grow up at a normal speed, let alone faster than we've ever done before. But what are some of the things that this means for kids if they're, encountering puberty for at a much earlier age than they have done in the past.
Yeah, so that's the side of it that really interested me, because it made me realize that actually, kids are being robbed of their childhood. And part of that comes down to the way we interact with them as parents, caregivers, aunties, uncles, friends. So, when you see a 9-year-old boy who's suddenly shot up and is kind of like wearing the body of a man, to avoid saying things like, oh my God, I bet all the girls have crushes on you because you look like such a young man, because you're immediately sexualizing them in a way that they're not ready for. Equally with girls talking about like, oh my God, look at you, you're turning into a woman. They don't want to be a woman yet. And actually the best thing we can do is just not comment on their bodies, but ask them about who they are. So like, what are you interested in, versus assuming, oh, I bet you play basketball and you're stronger than all the boys because you're so big now. So it's about actually the way we interact with them, and about really encouraging them to hold on to their childhood. So, fine, maybe in front of your friends, you need to look like you want to play on TikTok. But you know what? I know you said you want me to get rid of your doll's house, but I'm just going to hang on to it for a bit. And, encourage them to play with those things, encourage them to still be children, and to not over-sexualize children, because actually for girls especially, it becomes a lot of unwanted attention that they are simply not equipped to deal with. I talk about it being a bit like, those like Fisher-Price plastic cars that all the kids have, where your feet go through the gap at the bottom so you can run around in it. It's like having a Ferrari engine in a Fisher-Price, body. Like, they're just not quite ready for what they've got.
I feel like, and I know it's an old person to say about kids these days are growing up so quickly, but just having young girls myself, I think because of social media and the, Mecca and all these stores where they get their makeup from, and there's just this maturity that's coming way too young that they actually can't handle. But then if you pair that with their body changing, like, does that really change like sex ed? Does that change like the conversations, you have with your children and at schools about their body and consent and all that? Does that bring that a whole lot earlier? Or are you saying you shouldn't have that earlier because that's having conversations they're not ready for?
That's such a great question. And yeah, there is nuance to it. So 100% we need to be educating our children. So, if you imagine when you got pregnant, Carrie, no one telling you what was going to happen to your body, how terrifying that would be. And that, to some extent, it's obviously an extreme end, but there's a lesser version of that for kids that are experiencing puberty. So actually, yeah, at the age of 6 or 7, to start talking about actually mood swings. And sometimes we wake up feeling sad or angry, or sometimes something hurts us much more than we thought it would. And that's because of what your brain is doing. And that's okay. And I'm here to support you through that. And you can tell me about those feelings. And if one day you just say, Mummy, I'm having a sad day today, I'll say, thank you for telling me. And that's okay. And, then having the advice now is for girls to kind of have period packs in their bags from the age of 8. So to practice those things with them, put a sanitary pad in their knickers, get them to see what it feels like, how they do it, so that they're prepared. And then with boys, having conversations about things like wet dreams, because imagine being a boy and waking up and having no idea what was going on. It would be terrifying. So yeah, we definitely need to educate them on biology, and there's loads of great books that you can do that with. But yeah, we don't need to comment on their bodies. So I suppose that would be the difference.
Is there a correlation with the age that young people are starting to be sexually active?
I don't know about that one. I wouldn't necessarily assume so, but I think there would probably be a correlation between, this is speculative, but between kind of being sent inappropriate images on social media, that if girls are presenting themselves are much older, there's something about the way our identity is formed, that the world kind of holds a mirror up to us, and from what's reflected back to us, we form some sense of our identity. So if you're constantly having lots of older male attention, it's exciting, and girls don't realize what they're getting themselves into. Like, I know from myself, when I was a teenager, it would be so flattering if someone older was into you, but I didn't really know what they might be into. It was just the exciting part of it. So yeah, I think that there's probably a correlation between the way girls are presenting themselves and then being met with a response they weren't prepared for.
I just can't imagine. Like, I didn't get my period till the middle of high school. I don't think I grew boobs until I'd finished school. Like, I cannot imagine. And even then, I didn't really know what to do with any of it. I can't imagine all of that happening so much younger. Like, it makes me so anxious for this next generation. I mean, I know that shouldn't be the way, but even for my own children, I just think, oh my God, like, all the conversations we have to have earlier and all the things that, like, I mean, my parents didn't even have those conversations with me, but thinking that I should have them earlier is just like, they're my little girls still. Like, it just feels so weird. Oh, it's kind of sad in a way.
It is. I really do feel the same. I do feel like it's sad and that they're missing out on something. And I think you've touched on another great point about the fact that our parents didn't really have those conversations with us, and we all had nicknames for our private parts.
Yeah.
And that immediately adds some sense of shame or secrecy. And actually what I did, no word of a lie, is I walked around my house when I was like washing up and stuff saying elbow, vulva, knee, labia. These are parts of my body. Because I was like, every time I say one of those words, I feel so squirmy in my body.
Are you
And there's
saying
no
you've done
need
this as a parent, or you did this as a child? Oh, right.
as a parent, because I was like, I'm so squirmy about telling
Of
my
course.
kids the names, actual names, and that's my problem, not theirs. And it's amazing because now, like my 2-year-old, she goes, my vulva, and I'm like, you're right, it is. And like, but these words aren't dirty words; they should be able to say them.
Zara, I'm so interested, and I don't expect you to have an answer necessarily for this, because it would assume that you know what everybody in the world is thinking. But Carrie just mentioned that it's a bit sad, and you agreed. What we're talking about is like factual here. It's not speculation that kids, particularly young girls, are going through puberty earlier and earlier. But despite us knowing that as fact, do you think parents are ready to accept that?
That's such a great question. I think the kind of parents that follow my account would be, because they're the parents who are always trying to understand their children's behavior and the best way to manage it and break generational cycles. If we look at things like tantrums, again, we're the generation who was sent away when we were having tantrums because our parents didn't have the tools to deal with it. And this generation has so many more tools. So children know, actually, my anger is not something to be afraid of or ashamed of, and my parents will love me even when I'm angry. So yeah, the kind of audience that buy parenting books, that follow me, they would be prepared to take this on. And I mean, from the post that you guys were referring to, that's exactly what I found, is that there were people commenting saying, oh my God, this is what's going on with my child. I'm so glad I found this. I would imagine that, yes, there is still a large percentage of the population who aren't prepared to. And again, you get with the kind of, especially with dads and daughters, it can be a really tricky dynamic that dads find emerging womanhood really difficult. So I always say to the parents of like the 8-year-old girls I'm working with, to the dad, go out and buy sanitary pads with her, show her that her becoming a woman is not going to push you away and you're not afraid of it.
And thank God we've come so far. Like back in the day, it was, a rag in your knickers that would go, in the olden days, they'd walk to school or whatever and they'd freeze. It was so cold and they'd have to have this log between. Then it got to, you're looking confused.
No, I'd never heard that before.
Yeah, they used to have literally rags.
It's called like slang, you're on your rag.
And that's what it was in between your legs. But then it would be so cold, the water would go, the blood in the rags would turn to ice and then you'd carry it around. But then, in my generation, we only had sort of tampons and pads, and now like period undies and all the different options. Like it's just getting so much better and better for young girls if they're going to have it earlier. So many more options to make it more comfortable. But Zara, thank you so much. We could talk about it for ages. It's a fascinating chat. All the best, and thank you so much for your time.
Thanks so much, guys.